Hungary's parliament has passed a constitutional amendment to outlaw LGBTQ+ gatherings in public. The amendment, which was proposed by populist Prime Minister Viktor Orban, framed the ban as a means of protecting children from what it calls woke ideology and gender madness. Critics describe the constitutional changes as another step towards authoritarianism and the dismantling of democracy in Hungary.
As Hungary's parliament voted constitutional changes targeting the LGBTQ community, air horns from the opposition bench disrupt proceedings. A visibly irritated deputy speaker finally announced the results.
With 140 yes votes, 21 no votes and no abstentions, the vote passes and the demonstrators outside get what they deserve.
He was referring to the protesters outside the building. In a last-ditch attempt to stop the vote taking place, they tried to blockade Parliament before being dispersed by police. The amendment codifies a law which was fast-tracked through Parliament last month, banning public LGBTQ events such as Budapest Pride. Under the law, anyone attending such an event can be tracked using facial recognition software and fined. The reason for the changes, the government says, is the conservation of family values and children's rights. Prime Minister Viktor Orban argues that Hungary's children need protection from what he calls woke ideology and gender madness.
I can say it honestly, as a father, as a Hungarian citizen, as a person who is concerned about the future of this country, as a man who feels responsible for the spiritual state of the next generation. I have always been worried about such a thing as pride.
Critics say the actual reasons are more nefarious.
The past 15 years, step by step, they have been dismantling democracy and the rule of law. And in the past 2-3 months, we see that this process has been sped up. And since the election is coming up next year, it's going to be within a year, they will do everything in their power to stay in power. That is what this constitutional amendment is about.
Despite the ban, Budapest Pride organisers say that this year's march will go ahead in June. And the city's mayor says he hopes it will be much bigger than ever.
Let's cross over to Brussels now, where our correspondent Lucia Schulten is standing by. Lucia, how are Hungary's European partners reacting to this move?
Yeah, so right now things are relatively calm, but we have heard in this report that now the new constitutional changes are also codifying something that has already been decided earlier in March, which is basically the ban of the pride and also to forbid public gatherings of the LGBTQI+ community. And back then we have seen reactions here in the European Union. For example, we have seen a reaction by Hatja Labib, who is the Commissioner for Equality, and she's been saying that here in the European Union you should be able to live and love freely, and that also the right to gather peacefully should be a right which should be championed, and she's been clearly giving her solidarity to the LGBTQI+ community. Then we also have seen discussions in the European Parliament in the beginning of April. There have been quite some members of the European Parliament, especially from the left side of the House, so Social Democrats, Greens, but also Liberals and the left have been speaking out against this. And many of these European Parliament members have been saying that they are planning to go to Budapest end of June, to go to the Pride, whether she takes place or not, to also show their solidarity. So this will be an interesting one to watch, whether this really happens or not.
There are multiple aspects to this story, including the right of assembly, which you mentioned. But the EU explicitly recognizes LGBTQ+ rights in its legal framework, and member states are supposed to respect such rights. Is this change in Hungary's constitution, Lucia, compatible with that?
So the European Union does indeed have different legal bases for this. So on the one side, there are the so-called founding values. Among these founding values are, for example, democracy, freedom, but also the respect of human dignity, and also maybe here most importantly the right to equality and also the rule of law. And then on top of this, there is also the Charter of Fundamental Rights, and in there's also the right of the Union citizen to not be discriminated because of his sexual orientation, and also the freedom of assembly, as we have already mentioned. And the one who will look after this, or who's the guardian of these rights, is the European Commission. And we have asked the European Commission today what she makes of these new laws, and she said that she's looking into this, she's analyzing the new laws in Hungary, and if she deems this necessary, she's going to take legal steps and will not shy away from doing this. The European Commission has been doing this in the past against Hungary, especially with regards to rule of law, but also with regards to LGBTIQ plus rights. And right now, for example, there is a case pending at the court in Luxembourg, where also the LGBTIQ plus community has been targeted by Hungary. But part of the truth is also, a part of that story is also that we have not really seen a change, of course, by the Hungarian government over these proceedings. So the EU Commission might be ready to act there, but whether this will really impress the Hungarians to change their course, this is another question.
Lucia, thank you very much. That was our correspondent, Lucia Schulten, in Brussels. And joining us now from Budapest is Luca Dudits, an executive board member at Hatha Society. That's an NGO representing LGBTQ people in Hungary. Thanks for being with us. Luca, what does this constitutional amendment mean for you and the people you represent?
So this constitutional change means that they say that the right of children to protection and care shall proceed and take precedence over all other fundamental rights, unlike the exception of the right to life. So this means that they would be able to ban the Pride Assembly, and it would restrict the fundamental rights to any kind of freedom of assembly, human dignity and privacy. Now, as you said already, we will be marching on the 28th of June, and we are hoping that people from all across the world and of Europe are going to join us, and we will have more than 50,000 people to take a stand and show that they are in solidarity with the Hungarian LGBTQI people.
The constitutional change was passed with an overwhelming majority of lawmakers in Parliament. Did this level of support by lawmakers surprise you?
Not at all. This modification was submitted by the entire Fidesz faction, which makes up almost 70% of the parliament, and it was the very same people who voted for it. So unfortunately, this is very much in line with the two-thirds majority that the government has had for the past 15 years.
Okay, well, that tells us something about the government and how their grip on parliament. But what about public opinion? Is public opinion in Hungary on the side of the lawmakers who passed this amendment?
Not at all. Hungarians have become more and more accepting of LGBTQI people over the past 5 years. My organization, Hatha Society, does opinion polling every single year to see how attitudes are shifting in Hungary towards LGBTQI people. And we are very happy to report that now the majority society supports marriage equality, adoption by LGBTQI people, and also legal gender recognition. Also, just 5 years ago, it was around a fifth of Hungarians who have had an LGBTQI acquaintance, and now it is up to 60%. So I think that Viktor Orban's push and anti-LGBTQI legislations against the community has kind of backfired, and that it has inspired a lot of people to come out and share their gender identity or sexual orientation with their loved ones or colleagues and friends.
Now, this is not the first anti-LGBTQ law that's been passed in Hungary. In 2021, Hungary passed a law banning what the government regards as, quote, homosexual and transsexual propaganda. How has that law affected the lives of LGBTQ people in Hungary?
It hasn't only affected the lives of LGBTQI people, but everyone, unfortunately. So this law has basically made sex education in schools completely impossible. So for 4 years, we have had basically entire classes start and graduate high school who have had no access to sex education, which is a huge problem. Hungary is the first when it comes to teenage pregnancies on the continent. when it comes to LGBTQI people, we see that it is more and more difficult to access content, such as, for example, books that features LGBTQI topics or media. For example, if you want to order a book that has LGBTQI topics, it needs to be packaged individually, even in the bookstore, so you cannot actually browse it. You have to ask an attendee to help you with it, so that children aren't fooled into accessing accidental LGBTQI propaganda. And we also see a chilling effect on the law. So, for example, when children are and students are bullied for their sexual orientation or their gender identity, or just because they look or speak different than their peers, then the teachers and the school psychologists are unsure whether they can actually ask for someone to come in and mediate the issue, or whether they can have a class on why nobody should be bullied for their sexual orientation or gender identity. So that is the level we are reaching today, that the LGBTQI youth is disproportionately at risk of bullying, of discrimination, and we worry very much about their mental health.
Now, the European Commission and several European countries, as you know, are suing Budapest over that 2021 law discriminating against LGBTQ people. Do you think those lawsuits will change anything in Hungary?
Absolutely. We were very happy that 15 member states and the European Parliament have joined on the side of the European Commission in the infringement procedure. I think it is an extremely important and historic step that also shows the European support and solidarity that we in Hungary desperately need. And the CGU is very different from the Strasbourg court in the sense that at the end of the procedure, it will be able to also have fines and penalties if the Hungarian government chooses not to implement its decision. We are very much looking forward to the decision, which will be later this year. And we hope that we will see the very shameful Hungarian propaganda law annulled.
Luca Dudits, LGBTQ activist in Hungary, thank you very much for talking with us.
Thank you.